Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1067, and today's date is September 5th, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, out in Europe, we see the situation is continually deteriorating. The powers that be, they're trying to convince us that because of the Brexit, which actually didn't even happen yet, it was an advisory referendum, they're trying to convince us that's why Europe is falling apart right now. One minute they're telling us that everything is fine, the next minute Europe is falling apart because of the Brexit, and we can see right now the Eurozone, well, it is losing momentum, and it has lost momentum in August. And what we're seeing right now is that the entire system is contracting, and it is the weakest in 19 months. Now, we can see what's happening here. The entire economic system, it is falling apart. It's collapsing. And these central bankers, they need a way to explain why all this is happening. Now, in the beginning, they used the Brexit. And, of course, they were able to use the Brexit to bail out some of the Italian banks. And they're using it to blame on why this is happening in the economy. But this has been happening all along. We've been tracking it. We've been following it. We've been documenting it. This is why this is being done. This is why we do this every single day. To show that this just didn't come out of left field. This has been something that's been happening all along. And we can see right now that as we move forward, this entire economic system that we're in, the global economy, is just going to get worse and worse. Now we can see out in the U.S., the situation is getting worse and worse. Since Obama took office in 2008, we see there's 83,000 fewer coal jobs and 400 coal mines that didn't make it. Now, of course, we know there's a lot of regulations. We know they're using global warming. But we can see right now that the entire system is collapsing under too much government regulation. It's collapsing under this fake global warming where they're eventually going to try to impose a tax on the people, a carbon footprint. This is the end goal to all of this. It's not to save the environment. It's not to do anything but to stuff their pockets with more money from the people. That's it. That's what this is all about. It's all about keeping their system alive, keeping the people tied into the system, keeping the debt controlled. Because the central bankers, they don't want to put a country too far into debt, because then the world looks at it and says, you just collapsed a country. They don't want the country not to be in debt, because then they can't control the country. They need to have that fine line, and this is what we're seeing. So they need the people right now to keep the debt at a certain level. This is why they're talking about a wealth tax. This is why they're talking about a carbon tax. And we can see, as we move into the future right now, we can get a glimpse of what is happening. I mean, we just need to look at different countries. We look at Venezuela, we look at Brazil, we look at Greece, we look at Cyprus, we look throughout the European Union. We see what's happening with Hanjin. And we talked about this before, how this entire shipping system completely collapsed. Now, what's very interesting about this is that they're closing the ports and not allowing these ships into certain areas. So a lot of these vessels, they're just out at sea. And they're stranded at sea for weeks or might even be longer. And you have to remember, there's crews aboard these ships, 15 to 25 sailors. Now, they have food and water for a couple of weeks, but anything beyond this, they're in real trouble. And what they're saying is there is no more credit for this shipping company. Now, we talked about this before. When this system implodes, credit is going to freeze up, which means deliveries will will freeze up, because what we're seeing with Hanjin is they can only go and sail into a port if they pay the fees in cash. It's going to be the same exact thing when the entire global network comes crashing down, when credit freezes up. When we have this collapse and credit freezes, there will be no deliveries unless it's paid in cash, because credit will not be available at the time. And we're getting a glimpse into the future right now of what is going to happen. And this is why they're talking about deliveries being delayed for weeks or months at this point. Think about the trucking industry. Thinking about the rail traffic. Think about all the other shipping companies. When this system implodes and credit freezes up, we're going to have a major problem. People are not going to be able to get their supplies. People are going to go to the store, they're going to see the shelves completely bare and empty. They will not be able to get what they need. Cash won't help you, gold won't help you, silver won't help you. The only thing that will help you is to have your own store of food, water, medical supplies, toiletries, a weapon to protect yourself. And yes, you do need the cash and the gold, because these will come into play at certain points. Now, are you going to run out with your gold and silver and say, hey, I want to buy some toilet paper? No, you're going to use your cash first. This is why you need to keep cash on hand. You want to get rid of the paper in the beginning. As the paper inflates, you'll use all of it up. Once you use it up and the system breaks down, everything starts to reset, you're going to need your supplies. You're going to need your food, your water. And when the system resets, that's when the gold and the silver comes into play. Now we see the U.S. Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention. They have completely overstepped their authority in proposing to grant itself the power to go above and beyond the rights of the people. And what I'm talking about is this new proposed rule: control of communicable diseases. So on August 15, 2016, the CDC will self-invest itself with the power to apprehend healthy people and detain them indefinitely with no process of appeal. And this was published in the Federal Register, number 2016-18103. And the CDC right now wants to take those people who are contagious, or maybe they think they're contagious, and just detain them with no process of appeal. There's no oversight to this whatsoever. And the question we have to ask is, why are they doing this at this point? We know they're playing up the Zika virus. We understand a year ago or so they played up Ebola. And we know the pharmaceutical companies, they've been producing vaccines. And we can see they might use this in the future. Now, out in South Sudan, we see South Sudan, who initially said, listen, we do not want UN peacekeepers in our country. These are military troops, and we do not want them there. Now, after first rejecting them, they decided, okay, we will allow 4,000 of the UN peacekeepers into the country. Now, they first rejected it, and then they said, okay, we will allow this to happen. And you have to remember, the United States government central bankers, they've been pushing for this, because you have to remember going back in time where General Wesley C. Clark came out and said, listen, we'll be going into Sudan, we'll be going into Libya, we'll be going into Yemen, we'll be going into Iraq, Syria, Iran. The United States right now, they're losing control of what they set out to do. And that was to replace all the governments, control the natural resources, which is oil, set up a private Western central bank, and sell the oil using the dollar. And what's happening right now is they're losing control. To maintain control, they need to use whatever they possibly can to control what is happening in each one of these countries. And this is why the United States government, they were pushing to bring in UN armed troops to control the situation. The U.S. is in Libya, bombing in this country to allow the unity government to take control of the country. Even though the people object to this, they don't care. In Iraq, the same thing is happening. In Syria, they're trying to remove the elected government to replace it with a puppet government because this is part of their mission. We see U.S., France, and Germany, they're going to keep sanctions on Russia until the Minsk deal is fulfilled. And we can see right now, if Kiev is not going to fulfill the Minsk deal, the sanctions will never be lifted. And this is a game the United States government central bankers are playing right now because they know if Kiev doesn't follow through, this will never happen. And this is why the U.S. military, they're increasing their presence in Ukraine. They're bringing in more equipment, more troops into this area. And we're getting word from certain information that was intercepted that Kiev is preparing to use chemical weapons in the southeastern region. And this is something that we need to watch. We see President Putin called for the creation of conditions for signing a peace treaty between Russia and Japan. And they're also looking to resolve bilateral economic issues. Japan and Russia have never signed a permanent peace treaty after World War II due to disagreement over the 4 islands in that area. And it looks like they're looking to come closer together and sign a peace treaty. Obama and Putin, during the G20 meetings, they're telling diplomats there to keep working on the Syrian agreement. And we can see right now the U.S., they have preconditions for this ceasefire agreement. And we've been discussing them throughout all the other reports that I've done about how Assad needs to be removed. And this is one of the major sticking points. The other one is that they don't want Russia bombing the moderate rebels, which are intertwined with terrorist groups, which really, it's one gigantic terrorist group. And we can see this is the major problem. And it looks like Russia is not going to budge, and the U.S. is not going to budge. But the U.S. right now is actually blaming Turkey for the ceasefire peace talks breaking down because Turkey is now in Syria launching a ground operation, and they're saying they are the problem at this point. And you have to remember, this has all been created to create chaos in the region. And we can see right now that all of this is being done for one purpose and one purpose only. It's to remove Assad. Now, they planned on creating this no-fly zone. And this is where they are headed. No-fly zone, exclusive zone, safe zone. They have many, many names for it. But Iran is out there, and they're saying that Turkey, they should coordinate with Syria on what they're doing in their country. Because the Turkish government invaded a country and they didn't ask permission from the central government. So they're in a country and they're waging war. The United States is in a country where they didn't ask permission and they're waging war. Now, Turkey says they've cleaned the Islamic State away from the border of Turkey. And since they accomplished this, Erdogan is proposing a no-fly zone in northern Syria. And he wants this in this area. He's going to call it a safe zone. And he's looking at Russia and the U.S. to say, this is what we need, a no-fly zone in this area. Now, we know the terrorists, they're not flying planes. Who are flying planes? Russia's flying a plane. United States coalition forces are flying planes. Syria's flying planes. And Turkey is flying planes. So if they set up a no-fly zone, they're going to keep Russia and Syria out of that region. And this is what they're going to use for a forward launching pad, because the area they want is right near Aleppo in the northern section. Now they have the access from Turkey to bring in military assets into this area. And we're going to have to watch Turkey very closely, because if they're truly siding with Russia, they will close their borders right now. Since they cleared out the Islamic State, they can remove themselves from Syria, close the borders, and say, see, this is all we wanted to do. And we're going to have to watch this situation, because setting up a no-fly zone doesn't mean you're closing your borders. It means you're working with the U.S. to set up this area to be separate and apart from Syria. Now, we understand, going back in time about 15 years ago, the U.S. government, in response to 9/11, they took the unprecedented step of declaring war on terror. And they declared a state of national emergency on September 14, 2001. This, combined with the authorization for use of military force, the AUMF, that gave the executive branch dictatorial powers, allowing the invasion for Iraq and occupying it, and many other Middle Eastern countries. And of course, by doing this, they bypassed the Geneva Convention to declare foreign fighters as enemy combatants to be tortured and held indefinitely. Now, these new powers allowed the creation of a surveillance state. Politicians, of course, claim these powers would only be temporary. And you know, whenever the government comes out and says this is going to be temporary, it is going to be permanent. Because as we can see, many, many years later, it is completely permanent. Well, it looks like Obama has extended all of this, because we're still fighting terrorism. Now, what's very interesting about all of this is every time the government steps in to solve a problem, that problem just gets worse. Because we had a terrorism problem back 15 years ago, and it's more of a problem today. It's gotten worse, just like the war on drugs, because it's all created by the government. And it's going to get worse, because this is what they want. To show you, we need to take away more rights. We need more power. You need less. And this is exactly what they've been doing. So we can see right now they're extending this, and the government is never going to give up the power. Once the government receives the power, they never give it up. They want the power to do whatever they want. They don't want to deal with Congress. They don't want to deal with the people. And we can see this is completely evident from what they've been doing. It is becoming a dictatorship. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.